What if I told you that everything you're about to see isn't actually what it looks like? That behind the normal, everyday surface of human history, there's a deeper truth most people never even notice. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to condense millennia of human history into a fast-paced sprint. Because at the beginning, everything feels fine. People trust what they see, they follow routines, they don't question much. But slowly, things start to shift in ways that are almost invisible. Small patterns begin to appear, little changes that don't seem important at first, but over time, they build up into something much bigger. We're going to connect those historical dots and uncover what was really going on behind the scenes. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our flight path through the ages, so we don't get lost. We're hitting the dawn of civilization, antiquity and empires, faith and conquest, the age of connection, and finally, the path to global war. Number 1, the dawn of civilization, from rivers to empires. Now, it's fascinating to see how quickly a routine can turn into a revolution. At first, you have isolated pockets of humans just figuring out the absolute basics, right between two rivers in Iraq. You have the ancient Sumerians doing things we take for granted today, like dividing days into hours, minutes, and seconds, and inventing writing. But here's where the shift happens. A king named Sargon looks around at all these independent cities and decides it's inefficient, and he doesn't unite them for the greater good. No. As he put it, kings rule to increase their pride, power, and possessions. He conquers those cities and builds the first empire. Boom! A small shift, and suddenly the reality of the world changes. At roughly the same time, the Egyptians are building pyramids, the Minoans are painting, and over in the Indus River Valley, people are building incredibly organized cities with straight roads and a writing system that, to this exact day, no one knows how to read. This right here is exactly what I mean when I say the biggest truths are hidden in plain sight. Over in the Mediterranean, the Canaanites and Phoenicians realized something brilliant. Instead of just drawing complicated pictures, what if you assigned a sound to a simple symbol? The sound ah for ox, ba for house. Put them together, you get ab for father. They created the alphabet. It was a concept so fundamentally powerful that it was literally found etched on an ancient lice comb that's over 3,500 years old, a tiny, everyday object holding the key to human communication. And because it worked so perfectly, the Greeks and eventually everyone else just copied it. That invisible spread of ideas brings us right to section 2. Antiquity and empires, the classical world. Once you start noticing patterns, you see them everywhere. Look at how completely different regions were tackling the exact same big questions of life at roughly the same time. In the East, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama becomes a monk, seeks enlightenment, and teaches people how to escape suffering as the Buddha. In China, Confucius is teaching people to be nice and rule well, while Lao Tzu says, you know what, just go with the flow. Meanwhile, over in the West, the Greeks are playing sports at the Olympics to honor Zeus, inventing democracy, and doing a ton of thinking. Socrates teaches Plato, Plato teaches Aristotle, and Aristotle teaches a young man named Alexander. And that young man, Alexander the Great, takes his Greek army, takes revenge on the Persians, conquers the known world, and genuinely decides he is a god. But then, he dies, which is a pretty strong piece of evidence that he wasn't, and that shatters the illusion. Suddenly, we're left with a massive question that functions as a hinge for all of human history. Who rules the world now? Because all of his generals immediately started fighting over the answer, completely fracturing his massive empire. While the Greeks are busy fighting each other, the reality shifts again. The Romans are expanding in the West. They fight off the Phoenicians from Carthage. They even survive Hannibal marching elephants over the mountains. Roman leaders like Julius Caesar conquer more lands, win a civil war, and fix the calendar. Eventually, Augustus Caesar becomes the first emperor. But right in the middle of this massive, iron-fisted Roman rule, a guy named Jesus says he is the anointed king. The Romans crucify him, but his followers report seeing him alive 3 days later. And here's where you see how decisions based on incomplete information backfire. The Romans tried to crush this new religion. They burned Christians alive, fed them to lions, but those intense persecutions, they actually made Christianity even more popular, and it eventually spread everywhere. The very thing they tried to destroy ended up outlasting them. Let's move into section 3, faith and conquest, the Middle Ages. The surface reality is that the Roman Empire eventually gets divided in half, and the western half faces immense pressure. Huns are pushing Germanic tribes right into Roman territory. You literally have tribes called Vandals showing up in Rome looking for souvenirs, which is where we get the word vandalize. They conquer the West, but they end up adopting Roman ways. Meanwhile, the deeper truth is that the empire didn't completely fall. The eastern half, which we call the Byzantine Empire, just kept right on thriving and surviving for centuries. And while Europe is dealing with barbarian invasions, if we look beyond the obvious and check in on Asia, the Chinese are innovating at a breakneck pace. They're expanding through dynasties, building massive walls, and inventing things that completely change daily life. They invented paper, they invented printing, and crucially, they were the first to use toilet paper. To put that into perspective, the Romans were still wiping with sponges on sticks, and the Greeks were literally using broken clay pots. Just a little hidden truth of historical hygiene for you to think about. But here is the major takeaway for this era. It's the overwhelming invisible scale of connection happening all at once. In South Asia, India unites under the Maurya and Gupta empires, spreading Buddhism and Hinduism. In the Middle East, Muhammad unites the Arab clans under Islam, creating an unprecedentedly large empire. Over in Europe, the Franks established the Holy Roman Empire. Up north, the Vikings aren't just raiding, they're settling everywhere from Russia to North America. And in Central Asia, Genghis Khan and the Mongols sweep across the map, conquering twice as much land as Alexander the Great, and then doubling it again. Which brings us to Section 4, the Age of Connection, Exploration and Revolution. And the catalyst here? It's Gark. The Mongols might have accidentally brought the Black Death to Europe. With at least a third of the population dead, the old systems broke down, paving the way for a renaissance. In today's world, information is everywhere, but truth is rare. Well, this is the exact moment that started. Enter the printing press. Gutenberg wants to print Bibles, but Ferdinand of Spain is busy with the Inquisition, hunting down heretics. The printing press completely changes the game. In Germany, a Catholic priest named Martin Luther uses it to become essentially the world's first mass media influencer, sparking the Protestant Reformation. Suddenly, religion, politics, and technology are colliding on a massive scale, shifting power dynamics permanently. This era also kicks off the age of exploration, and with it, a devastating system that affected real lives every single day. Columbus sails west, Spain and Portugal divide the map, and a vicious, cyclical trade loop is established behind the scenes. Portuguese traders sailed to Africa, trading European goods for enslaved Africans. They traded those enslaved human beings in the Americas for food and resources, and then traded that food for more goods back in Europe. It was a brutal machine that built the economic foundations of the modern world. Now watch how these choices snowball. Global empires are fighting over colonies, which leads to massive debt. The British try to tax the Americans to pay for it. The Americans revolt. The French help the Americans go into massive debt themselves, tax their own people, and spark the French Revolution. Napoleon rises and falls, and Simon Bolivar looks at all of this and leads revolution after revolution in Latin America. It's a literal domino effect. Once you start questioning things and thinking critically, everything changes. The British realize this, and instead of just fighting, they decide to have a different kind of revolution, an industrial one, using steam power to make everything faster, cheaper, and vastly more powerful. And that leads us straight into our final sprint, Section 5, the path to global war, empires collide. Because when you industrialize, you need resources, and you need new markets. The patterns are accelerating now. Just look at the frantic global land grab of the 19th century. The British East India Company takes over India. The British Navy seizes Hong Kong just to force China into the opium trade. The US forces Japan to stop isolating. Russia unconquers itself from the Mongols and expands massively. And back in Europe, Italy and Germany finally unite into single nations, look around, and decide they want colonies too. Everyone is acting on the same relentless impulse for control. But when you want to take over the world, you need an excuse. You need to shape opinions so people go along with it. To justify the upcoming scramble for Africa, European powers pointed to Charles Darwin's new theories on evolution. Scientists of the time literally claimed that because humans evolved, Europeans were obviously the fittest to survive and rule over the world. They used science as an ideological shield, a way to claim they had the natural, undeniable right to colonize other continents. But remember what I said earlier? What you see on the surface is only a small piece of the full picture. The narrative Europeans sold was that Africa was just this empty, primitive space waiting to be claimed. But the truth was right there. Africans already occupied the continent, and they had vast, complex, advanced empires that completely predated this scramble. Egypt and Kush, Axum and Ethiopia, the immense wealth of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, the builders of Great Zimbabwe, the Kingdom of Congo, the Zulus. The continent was already rich with deep history and structure. But the colonial powers chose to ignore the dots, and the race began anyway. The Italians invaded, the Belgians butchered, the Germans set up bases, the French captured colonies, and Britain became the biggest empire in human history. Everyone is expanding, everyone is competing.
They're inventing crazy new technologies like telegraphs, battleships, and submarines. But there's a fatal flaw in this pattern. The map is full. There is literally nowhere left to expand except into the lands of the crumbling Ottoman Empire. You have massive technological leaps, intense territorial competition, and all these unstoppable great powers backed into a corner. So the next time a situation feels normal, take a second and ask yourself, what am I missing? With all this pressure building and nowhere left to go, what do you think happens next? This is the exact powder keg that paved the path directly into the world wars. Keep questioning the surface, keep looking for the hidden patterns, and I'll see you in the next explainer.